Happy Wednesday. I see we have a few people on the call. Thank you for joining. If you have not met me, I would love to say hello. My name is Samantha. Welcome. Who are all of you?
Hello, Samantha. Arlene Connolly Drummond calling from OIC of South Florida. Happy to meet you.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
No obligation to come off mute and chat. Just wanted to, meet and greet in this virtual space. I feel like it's challenging. So hopefully you enjoyed the walk-on music.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Oh, we still have a couple of people joining us. Hey, Nancy.
Hi.
Good to see ya. Well, we can go ahead and jump right in. If you got this invitation to talk about all things SNAP employment and training, you're in the right space. If you have no idea what that is or why you're here, that's okay. I would love for you to hang on. It's an hour. I am co-facilitating with my colleague Erin from Center for Employment Opportunities. And the TLDR of why we're here today is that Florida has finally opened up an RFA for organizations to apply as SNAP employment and training third-party providers. And I know Nancy is shaking her head right now because this has been years in the waiting. I'm so excited. Just a quick show of hands, who knows what SNAP employment and training is? It's okay if you say no. Good, Nancy, you remember. Great. Hasn't gone to the wayside. Does anyone not know? Show of hands or drop in the chat. Don't be shy. Okay, Nikki. Okay, I'm gonna assume all the rest of y'all are experts. Okay. All right, well, fear not if you don't know what SNAP employment and training is. We're gonna do a quick what is this thing? Welcome to Acronym City is my warning. We will send out the slide deck and are here for questions. So I encourage you to ask questions in the chat, come off mute, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm Samantha. I do all things employment and training at Redefine. This is the arena that I built my career in. And so it's really exciting that Florida is finally getting on board. And Erin, please come off mute and introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Weisenbach. I'm the Director of Technical Assistance here at the Center for Employment Opportunities. The Center for Employment Opportunities, also acronyms, is CEO. We are the largest re-entry organization provider of employment services for justice-impacted individuals across the country. We're operating in 12 states currently, not in Florida, at least at the moment, and we have 30 locations across the country. In all of our locations, we operate a social enterprise, providing paid employment training to all of our participants who enter in our program. And we, in every single location and state, we are SNAP E&T providers. So we're utilizing our expertise working in this space to help organizations such as yourself also be able to access these programs as well. So welcome and nice meeting you all.
All right. So just a quick run of show. We'll do welcome introductions. You just met us. Lovely to have all of you in this Zoom room. What is SNAP employment and training? And I'm actually Nancy. If you could take those slides. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Nancy came through one of our SNAP E&T cohorts, which feels like eons ago. Just kidding. I won't do that to you. We're going to walk through the application itself so that you can see it and to get a sense of what you'll need to prepare. And then hold time for Q&A, and then what are our next steps and some very rapid response technical assistance we can provide to you all if you're interested in applying. Okay, so the program. So SNAP Employment and Training is a federal source of funding that allows organizations that become what we call third-party providers to get reimbursed for services, employment and training services that you are providing to SNAP recipients. This program was authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill. It started in Washington State, which is where I am, and then kind of spread throughout the country. And now Florida is getting on board, which is really exciting. It's the long game. It's chess, not checkers, as I like to say. Um, so you are utilizing non-federal funds first. That is, those are the types of funds that are eligible for reimbursement. So you're funding your services, serving participants, getting folks into jobs and training. You, they're attending their classes, you're providing the services, they're learning skills, etc. And then Florida will reimburse you for 50% of those eligible costs. So it's work you're already doing. We're not recreating a program, we're not reinventing the wheel. There's some tweaks and things you'll have to do because it's federal funds and strings. So that is what the program is like in a nutshell. I know that I'm probably making it sound way easier than it actually is. Any questions there? Okay. So who of the people you're serving in your communities are eligible? So you'll have there will be a mechanism in which you check for eligibility, making sure your participants are receiving SNAP. I don't know what that looks like in Florida yet. So more to come. But they are receiving SNAP. They are enrolled in one of your training programs, right? Um, they were referred to you by an approved agency, and all that means is either the state through your human services department referred them to you, or they came to you first and you communicated with that agency that they're receiving SNAP and would like to participate. That's all that means. And you're eligible for those services to be reimbursed after they are enrolled into your program. So the kind of standard operating procedures here, yeah? So in Florida, the referral pathway, like I was speaking to on the right side of the screen, the Department of Children and Families is, as it's known in Florida, local workforce development board. Any partnerships there amongst our group today? Do you have relationships with your workforce? Well, get ready, buckle up. You will. And then to you. So there's a relationship between all three entities, or there will be. So what kind of services am I talking about? I keep just saying like employment and training. What does that mean? So job readiness and job search, work experience or work-based learning. I will caution you, what we typically think of as the services that we're providing, SNAP Employment and Training likes to call them all kinds of different things. So if you're not, I promise the services you're delivering are aligned in some way. It may just be called something different. Occupational skills training, case management services, very much needed and eligible for reimbursement. Education, so like more formalized credential pathways and licenses. And then supportive services, so things like transportation or interview clothing are also reimbursable according to this new RFP. Any questions on services? No, we're all eager or tired. All right. So who can apply? So organizations like yourselves, we're hoping you're all interested. I know, Nancy, you and your team are probably like chomping at the bit, ready to go. I don't know if you've looked at the application yet, but I'm really excited.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the application yet. I know that there's a lot that we do that would be covered, but I want to look at it before we get started to make sure,
Yeah.
what's covered. Like when you say transportation, we finance bikes for all of our participants, electric bikes, because we're in Miami and it's just
Hot.
the best way for them to get to work and back. So, I was just like, oh, okay, I wonder if that would apply. They
Uh,
pay us back for it at the present, but it would be great to be able to include it.
uh,
So,
I don't remember if they specified bicycles, but I do know bicycles are allowed in some states. So unless they redlined bicycles specifically, then likely eligible.
or maybe an annual bus train pass.
That's very common
Oh,
and I'm 99% sure allowable. Always that
okay.
1% with E&T, you know?
Yeah.
Um, good comments, good questions. Um, so going back to like who should apply to this opportunity? So community-based organizations, nonprofit service providers, for-profit service providers are also providers across the country. If you're a local or public agency, workforce-aligned education and training providers, all of you fall into one or more of these categories, and then apprenticeship sponsors. Essentially, if you're providing training to get folks into jobs, you're likely aligned, is like the TLDR. So it is a federal contract, which means, again, reporting and invoicing is very structured. And there is an admin lift to standing up your program. So you have, financial stability. This is a way to diversify your funding structure, but you have cash flow to like fund your programming, like you're already kind of doing this work, right? So you don't have any like this isn't seed funding. You don't get funding upfront. It's a reimbursement. That's why we have that up there. Um, you probably want to have like a good record with your other contracts. If you have some like significant like federal relationships that have some things you need to fix, like maybe we wait for the next round to come out. And we can talk about that if that's something you're worried about. And you want to have good systems in place. So, tracking, invoicing, documentation. If you're not friends with your fiscal team or your accounting team, go over there and bring someone some coffee because you will be. SNAP employment and training really does force everyone to play like together, I like to say, like programs, team, leadership, direct service staff, and your fiscal staff to come together so that your invoices are accurate and the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. So the money rules. Everyone's like, talk to me about the money. Okay, here we are. So this is kind of the pathway of how it works. So you submit an invoice to the state and you're like, hey, we served these people that we verified with you that are on SNAP. This is what this list of participants is. Here's all of our expenses that we incurred to serve them and the eligible services that we provided. So Florida looks at it and they're like, yep, this looks great. And they cut you a check, so to speak. I actually don't know if it's like a deposit or whatever. It used to be checks back in the day. Um, and so then Florida gives you that check back, right? And then when you receive it, it does lose its federal designation. So you can do with it what you at your organization need to do with it. We, of course, recommend putting it back into your employment and training programs to enhance them, make them more robust, serve more participants, right? But if your organization has other needs, like you're like, man, we really need to expand our parking lot so that we can eventually serve more participants, you can do so. Just to reiterate here, you have to be providing all of these services with non-federal funds first. You cannot charge for the time spent working with folks before they're enrolled into your program. So like outreach just for your program is not allowable. But if you're doing outreach for your E&T program, that is allowable. And then, of course, everything after that person is enrolled is allowable. And we can, if you apply and are awarded, we can provide technical assistance to you to kind of figure out how to separate all of that. We got you, right, Erin?
Absolutely.
And then, of course, this goes without saying, no undocumented costs. Don't be just throwing things on your invoice. That will get you in hot water real quick. It's already hot in Florida, so And I think Andrew, sorry, Aaron, this is where you take over.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, with this application, as you can see with this timeline, like we're on a really, really tight deadline for being able to get your submission into the state. Currently, the application window is just running from this June 17th to July 17th period. So you have, I think it's like 9 days from today to get your application submitted. And there's quite a decent amount of detail that they're going to be looking for in your application. And so what we thought would be a good idea today was to kind of walk through what a lot of those questions are in the application, provide some best practices for what you might want to consider including, and then go through some of the documents that they're asking for that be uploaded to see if you can have all that to ready to go. Obviously, too, we want to offer the opportunity at the end of this that if you have questions about any of these things in your application, that you can reach out to us so that maybe we can provide you a little bit of additional support. But that deadline for submission is July 17th. And then from anything that gets submitted now all the way through July 24th, that's going to be the state's period in which they're going to be reviewing these applications and then potentially integrating them into their state plans. Everything that gets included into a state's SNAP E&T state plan has to be reviewed by FNS, now known as FNA, the Food Nutrition Administration, to basically approve that state plan, because a state cannot operate their SNAP E&T plan until their plan is approved, and that gets done each and every single year. So as a potential third-party provider, if you're going to provide E&T services, the state needs to incorporate your plan or your program into that state plan so it can get reviewed and approved. So that is a next step that will happen. And generally, I don't know what Florida's timeline for this is, but generally this is expected to be submitted to FNA no later than August the 15th, because there is a very tight clock for when FNA has to do this review process with the state and get it approved, because we're looking to get people approved into the state plan by October 1st, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year. At some point in time, if you are approved as a provider, there's going to be some onboarding agreements and some training and things like that that's going to have to happen. You'll generally get a contract from the state laying out all the roles and responsibilities, any kind of trainings you need to go through. So that would be that last step before you actually began delivering services for that agreements and onboarding process. Real quick too, I just want to point out like what the application is that we're going to be going over. Let's see. So I'm going to just show you real quick if you haven't taken a look at it yet. Samantha, is this showing up?
Yeah, if everyone toggles to the top of the Zoom, you can see Aaron's
Oh,
screen. Can everyone see his screen?
yep.
Come off mute and say
So
no if you can't. All right.
Perfect. So Florida has provided a application portal for you to go in and enter all of the information for your plan submission. The link's also going to be provided at the end of this presentation, so you have that. But it just walks you through who you are, details about your program, specific as it relates to your participant eligibility and how you're engaging with participants. A lot of this is going to be narrative driven, so you'll just kind of provide a brief description or a paragraph of what these answering these questions, what your funding looks like. Again, Samantha stated you need to have non-federal funds, so they're going to want to know what those are, and you'll probably likely have to provide source documentation documenting what those non-federal funds are, what your program is going to cost. And here you're going to focus specifically on your SNAP E&T program costs, because you could be serving participants not only just SNAP E&T, right? And so what they're going to be looking for is if you were to take your entire program, you need to break it down into what is actually going to be related to your SNAP E&T and submit a budget for that. So they're going to be looking to see what that is. Ultimately, what that's going to do is allow them to understand what the cost per participant is for each of your participants that you'd be serving in the SNAP E&T program. And that's something that they look at just to make sure that it's in line for if you're operating an education component for, say, vocational training and CDL, they kind of have an idea of what an average cost per participant for running through that program is going to be. So they want to make sure that that's kind of in alignment. And that's not to say that if you're over or under something significantly, that's going to automatically disqualify you, but it could also mean that they're just going to have some additional questions about that. So the scope of your TPP program, and then compliance and reimbursement, just kind of acknowledging, how this program works. And then lastly, there's going to be a section that talks about uploading some documentation. So just real quick, this is what we wanted to kind of go over with you. And we'll go through some of these questions to show that. And so I'm going to stop sharing so we can go back to Samantha's presentation.
Next slide.
Right, so within that application, we're going to focus on really these 5 key points, which I walked through some of that already. So your program details, very basic information about you, a narrative of how your program works, your participant eligibility engagement process, how you engage with participants, who your participants are, what area geographics are you serving them in, things like that, so they know that the areas in population that you're going to be serving. Funding capacity, program funding and capacity, again, this goes to those non-federal funds and your capacity to be able to serve these populations within your program. The scope of the proposed TPP program, so really this is that start to end of what your program is and how you're going to be supporting SNAP E&T participants within it, and again, that document submission checklist. Next slide, please. Okay, so the very first section is going to be the narrative of the program details. So this is going to be the opportunity for you to talk about who you are, what kind of program you're serving, what kind of components you're serving, like what specific activities you are, and really what you want to do is anchor this specifically around SNAP E&T eligible activities. A lot of you have amazing programs and you do a lot of things outside of just potentially employment and training. I think it's a good idea to be able to highlight that in a very basic level of like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, but you definitely want to make sure that your focus on this section is really going to be heavily on that employment and training side. The other thing too, I would say, is that if you're offering wraparound services that extend beyond only things that are employment and training related, that really speaks to how you're supporting target populations that FNA and the state are really looking to make sure that we're reaching out to and serving, then it's always a great idea to be able to highlight that as well, just because it allows you to really show the value of what you're bringing to the table as a third-party provider to SNAP E&T, because your value proposition is, hey, we're not only providing SNAP E&T training, but if you're doing some of these other things that are also supporting your participants, you're not billing for those things because they're outside of what would be employment and training related, but they're helping your participants become successful. So it is a great way to try to highlight that as well, to kind of strengthen your position as you're not only getting employment and training, but you're also getting these extra things that are helping the participants succeed and be successful. But you want to make sure still the meat of this application, you want to focus on those employment and training eligible activities.
I can give a quick example for folks that might help make this land. Like if you're providing like mental health support, like let's say you have like someone that comes on site and provides that, that's wonderful and great and definitely something that's needed. However, it's not allowable for reimbursement. So that's kind of what Erin is speaking to.
What about
Thanks.
housing? Would housing be another thing?
Is housing listed in there?
Yeah, not as a eligible reimbursement,
Yeah.
no.
But it's okay.
However,
But
I'll remind me to circle back to this at the end, Nancy.
But with that being said, Nancy, and I'll wait for Samantha to be able to kind of give more of her context. But if you are providing housing services, and let's say it's whatever it is that you're providing is not allowable, we know that housing insecurity is a big barrier for people to be able to be out there and working. Like if you're homeless, as an example, it's really difficult for you to be able to secure a job and then be able to maintain that security to go back and forth, because you need those foundational things first. You need your housing, you need your food, you need safety. These things need to be met generally before you're able to actually go out and start working, right? So if those are things that you're providing, you're helping ensure that that SNAP E&T participant is going to be more successful, and that when they complete your program, that they're going to be able to maintain employment, right, and build that security that moves them propel towards self-sufficiency. So I think that is a prime example of like an additional service that you're able to provide that bolsters you as a provider, even if some of those expenses aren't eligible for reimbursement, right? So I think that's an excellent example, though, of how showcasing what you do helps to strengthen the program and be a value-added partner.
And yeah, I'll save a little bit more when we get to sort of the end about on the housing piece. Next slide, or
Yes, yeah. So one of the questions, and it's kind of strange to me that this is in the application, to be quite honest with you, but it says, describe your process for verifying SNAP E&T ABOD participant eligibility. I have to be completely honest with all of you. Like, I was not familiar with what this looks like in Florida because CEO is not a provider. So I had to try to do some digging to find out how that works. I know that it can vary from state to state, and I know how we do it in all the states that we operate in. So I had to do some checking on this. And the other thing to remember too, I guess, that it's not really as important for you as a provider, is that Florida is what is considered a mandatory state. So anyone who doesn't has an ABOD, what's called an ABOD, able-bodied adult without dependents, is required to participate in SNAP E&T. So there is a mechanism for how a participant gets enrolled in the SNAP, but then also how they get referred to SNAP E&T. You as a provider, because Florida doesn't currently have a reverse referral system, they would be sending all of their referrals directly to you. And my expectation of that is going to be that they're going to be also telling you, that these are ABOD individuals. So that's going to be part of that verification to ensure that you're, serving eligible SNAP participants, is that you will take that direct referral that you're going to get directly from the agency. And they're basically telling you, hey, I have a SNAP participant and they're an ABOD. So these are so that you know that and how you're going to verify that. But basically on the left-hand side, we just kind of notate it's a mandatory state. So anyone who is an ABOD, which an ABOD is a person who is 18 to 59, that they must participate. If they don't have a dependent child under the age of 14, they're going to have to participate. And then they, obviously, if they have a disability that prevents them from being able to work, that they would get an exemption from that. But otherwise, anybody else who's receiving SNAP benefits, they're going to receive that ABOD designation, and they're going to be required to participate in this. But the DCF's eligibility system feeds this into Florida Commerce, which is the intermediary of record for the state currently, feeds that into their system, and then it's a nightly process that it gets updated. So that's all stuff you don't really need to necessarily know, but what you do need to know is what's going to happen after that. And that's that they're going to refer this participant to your program. So eligibility is going to screen a participant, designate whether they're an ABOD or not. And if they are an ABOD, then they're going to be informed of the requirement to participate in SNAP E&T. They're going to perform an initial assessment of that participant and then try to determine what the best provider pathway will be for them based off of their work experience, their education experience, their abilities, barriers, things like that. And then also, what is it that they are most in need of or what's going to help them secure employment. So that's when they would look at you as a provider and they're going to say, okay, this person has, their GED, they don't have any disabilities that would prevent them from, working in a warehouse or something like that. This provider provides warehouse work experience, training, forklift certification, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to refer them to this TPP. You would receive that referral then. And so in this part of that application, you really only just need to hit on the fact that you're only serving participants referred to you by the workforce boards, and that you as a provider, you don't determine a person's status and whether they're an ABOT or not. That's always going to be a function of the eligibility staff. But you just need to know if somebody is an ABOT and they're referred to your program, that they have this work requirement to participate in your program. And then how you can confirm that eligibility happens. This is obviously something that the state was going to have to provide to you. But generally what we have in all of our states is either a system in where we are, as a provider, is able to log into it and we can check that your SNAP participant has maintained their benefits and that they're still eligible each and every month. And also that, that ABOD status designation can change from month to month. It doesn't normally happen, but, if life changes, life events happen that changes their circumstances, they could get that ABOT designation exempted from them, and that might change how things work. But the state's generally going to provide a mechanism for you to verify that each and every month to make sure that your participants are staying eligible. So I would just... Basically what I'm saying here is you just want to make sure that you're designating the fact that you would work with your state agency to verify status each month, and that eligibility teams are the ones who get that ABOT designation status. You don't need to do that designation yourself.
Any questions? That was a lot of information. I know we're kind of going through things quickly, but we want to deliver this content and leave enough room for questions. If you don't have any yet and you do as you're going through the application, that's also okay.
Thanks, Sam. This is I think one of the trickiest questions that I was going through on the application, because it's just but we wanted to make sure it puts it in there so that you all know as a provider what this means. And what they're looking for.
I have a question. We have an in-prison program and we do wraparound services when they re-enter into society, including transitional housing and our social enterprise at the store. So if we're not signing them up for SNAP, how do we get them covered? I'm not really, and we're going to get referrals from SNAP. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so right now they have a direct referral process only. Their state plan does not have what's called a reverse referral, where you might have somebody who's a SNAP participant come to you directly, and then you could reverse referral. So my suggestion in this case, until the state does opt to also incorporate a reverse referral program, if you have a participant, let's say you already have them in your door, that you're there, and you know that they are likely going to be SNAP E&T eligible, you can provide assistance to them to get them enrolled and get them the benefits established. And then once that happens, they will automatically be screened for SNAP E&T. And then you can even ask that participant ask their eligibility worker to refer them to you. So that way, then you could get that direct referral that way. So that would be my recommendation in that case.
And then the other referrals that they give us, are we required to have them in our employment and training program?
Generally, no. And part of the application is that you would designate the populations that you serve. So let's say you only serve CEO as an example. a condition for participating in our program is that they have to be justice impacted. So we only serve people who are on parole, probation, and we really target those who have just been released from incarceration. So if you don't meet that eligibility, then in all the states that we operate in, they're ineligible for our program. And even if we were to receive a direct referral, because let's say the eligibility staff missed that in like the profile of third-party providers, we would do what's called a provider determination or a rejection to state that this person is not, does not fit our program criteria, and we would send that direct referral back to the eligibility staff for them to rescreen that participant for another provider.
And
So I'll be honest, we don't. Sorry, I would be honest. Like, we don't receive very many direct referrals in any of the states that we operate in, where the participants aren't meeting our screening criteria. So I hopefully Florida will do a great job to where you wouldn't get like a whole bunch of direct referrals that you wouldn't normally serve, and you have to basically just send them all back. But TBD, since this is new for the state as well.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide, or
yeah, so we're on this one still, Samantha.
Okay.
So the next question is explain how you're going to provide and document participant orientation. So this is an important question because as the third-party provider, you are required to do an orientation of your participants. And the purpose of the orientation is to make sure that the participant who's enrolling into your program understands, who you are, what your program is, what are the requirements, what is the time frame of participation, and all of that, because the state doesn't want to invest in referring a SNAP E&T participant to you, and then you start providing services only to find out that they weren't fully aware of what they signed up for, and halfway through the program they end up dropping out. That's not a good utilization of your time as a provider. It's not a good utilization of the participant's time. So that orientation is really there to determine that, yes, this participant knows who you are and what your program involves, and so that they can make that determination that they're going to participate with you, and that this is a good fit for them. The other part of that orientation is to make sure that they understand, or for you to understand the requirements. And so there's an assessment piece that generally will happen either during this process or shortly after, that assesses them for barriers and making sure that, again, that just as the participant understands what the requirements are, that they're able to and willing to participate, but also you as the provider understand what the limitations are of your participant, to make sure that there aren't any barriers that they will have that's going to prevent them from being able to successfully complete your program. So the key of this question is really to help them understand what your orientation process looks like, and how are you determining who you're actually accepting into the program, and how you are making sure that the participants are fully aware. So this, we won't go through all of these, but basically the highlights that I would say, the things that you might want to make sure that you're covering in what your orientation would look like. Any questions about that? Okay, next slide, please. So just as I said, you have that orientation question. Then very next question is about the assessment process. So provide details of your assessment process to identify participant barriers, strengths, and career goals. So that assessment, like I said, is where you're going to identify what their supportive service needs are, what kind of barriers that they might have to be able to participate in your program or to receive employment in a related field of your training once employment is completed. And part of that assessment too is to understand how you might tailor an individualized employment plan for that participant, for how they're going to progress through your program and complete, and making sure that how you keep track of that participant and do your case management and ensure that while they're progressing through the program, that they're making progress and that they're going to complete. So that assessment is going to be done pretty early before you actually start performing services in the actual component that you operate in. A primary example of an assessment that we would do, and some of this is going to be done probably by the state, because when they're already doing that initial assessment. As an example, let's say you're offering a credentialing program for, say, like a CDL, but in order for them to be able to enroll into that program, they have to have either a GED or high school equivalent, if that might be a requirement. That assessment that the state is going to do is going to hopefully assess whether or not they meet that criteria, and if they don't, they're not going to refer that participant to you. But if they do, then they would refer to you. But still, part of your assessment is going to be double checking all of those boxes. What's their employment history? What's their education history? Again, what are their barriers and supportive service needs? So these are all going to be things that are going to be part of your assessment. And ultimately, that's going to translate into your IEP, or individualized employment plan, which is a requirement in the state of Florida that every SNAP E&T participant has one when they're participating in the program. And that's really the source of how you're going to track participant progress and success through that individualized employment plan. So next slide, please. So this is also a pretty critical piece. So as a SNAP employment and training provider, there is going to be monthly or weekly reporting requirements, depending on the state. Most of the states that we operate in, we report all of our data just in a lump sum monthly basis, unless there are certain events that happen throughout the program. Like, let's say somebody got employed, we might have a requirement that we have to report that employment within 7 days or 14 days. But for the bulk of our data, we normally have to provide that to the state on a monthly basis. So here they're wanting to understand, like, really, what is your processes in place to track your participant engagement in your program? They're going to want to know things like the amount of time the participant spent engaged in component activities, the dates possibly of when they engaged in those components and how many hours each day, and tracking that attendance. So that's generally going to be a requirement. One of the things about an ABOD is that they have a work requirement, and they have to meet the federal minimum standard is 80 hours per month participating in work activities, and that includes participating in your employment and training program. So it's important, as you as a provider are able to provide tracking of all the hours that the participants are spending in your program. So you want to be able to make sure how you're tracking those activities, describing how you're capturing the attendance and the hours and the person's component status. If you're using any software or logs or spreadsheets, it might be a good idea to just kind of reference that, basically, that's how you do this. But the idea is that you want to have these systems in place to be able to make sure that you are able to report out on these metrics when they're asked for. And then there is a piece at the end of the application where they're going to ask for you to maybe submit some examples of what these tracking logs might look like, or what these reports, if you're using a software, would look like, just so they can verify that. So you want to make sure that whatever you answer in this narrative question here, that it translates to the backup documentation that you're going to submit at the end of the application to support this question. Next slide, please. So the next part of this section is going to be talking about the program funding and your participant capacity. So this is where they're going to ask you questions about your non-federal funding sources. This is generally one of the easiest questions that we have as a provider, because we know who all of our funding sources are, and we know which parts of our funding sources we're going to utilize to run our SNAP E&T program. excuse me, you just want to make sure that you document who those non-federal funding sources are. And I would say it's a good process too is to designate the amounts that each of those funding sources are going to be providing towards your program. At the end of the day, even though this application itself does not ask for a SNAP E&T budget, it just asks for the program amount. I think it's a best practice to make sure, like, if you're going to provide an amount in the application of what your SNAP E&T program cost is going to be, I think you should probably have already in place the budget that you utilize to come up with that amount, because otherwise it's kind of hard to justify how you designate that that's the amount that you've arrived at. But within that, you'll know, okay, this is what my SNAP employment training is, and then from there you can list out what your budget. What those non-federal fund sources are in relation to that budget that you would create. The proposed number of participants that you're expecting to serve. So this piece is, we're not talking about the total number of participants that you are going to serve in your entire program. We're speaking about only those that are your SNAP E&T program participants. So if you're serving a combination of both SNAP E&T and non-E&T providers, or excuse me, participants, you want to only focus in on how many you believe are going to be SNAP E&T eligible, and that's the number that you're going to provide here. So as an example, a CEO, we, in some states, we know that 70% of our participants that we expect to serve in the entire year are SNAP recipients. And so when we would report this number out, when we look at our program in, say, Tulsa, Oklahoma, we know we're going to serve X number of participants as our goal for this year, and we would take 70% of that to apply to that. So that's what's the number that I would suggest you put in here. Yes,
And I will say, this is recorded, so I might get in trouble for saying this, but your first year is always kind of a mess because you're guessing, you have no data to go on. Also, this is new for Florida. I like to call the first year or two, especially when a state is rolling this out, the pancake year, because you always throw the first one away. You'll be building out your muscle memory and all of those good things, but it's your best guess with like no data. So fear not, like first year is always not wildly accurate in terms of your estimations. You'll get better over time though.
Yeah, that's a good call out.
Is it better? Is it better to lean towards under or over? Because
I think under for your first year.
Yeah. Okay.
But
yeah, the thing that I would just again caution is like within this, so there's two key numbers that you're gonna, and I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on with my camera. It's just I see it zooming in and out, and I apologize. But the thing is that we're going to be looking at those two things. Is one is how many participants you're serving, and then what is your total cost for running your program in that SNAP E&T, and that ultimately will come down to a cost per participant, and they're going to be looking to see that is in line with what their expectations would be. So my only caution, and it's I don't know what the magic number is for each participant. I know what CEO's cost per participant is across all of our locations, and I know what is reasonable for the components that we're offering. I think that the key there is just to making sure that they are proportionate to like, you don't want to have a really high number of participants served but a really low budget, because that's going to be like, it's not really going to make sense. And then vice versa, like if you have a really expense heavy budget but you're only serving 15 or 20 SNAP participants, that's going to really increase that cost per participant. So that's the only thing I would keep in mind there when you're thinking about that number, is just making sure that they're realistic and that they're in line with what would be reasonable expectations for running this component. Okay. So the scope of the TPP program, again, some of this might have been already covered in your program description, but really what they're looking for is what geography or area are you covering? So what communities are you serving? the components that you're going to be operating in, what the participant journeys looks like in that outcome. Like if you're serving justice impacted individuals, like you would kind of scope that out, that we're serving this target population, and people of this age, who are looking to receive employment training and job placement for security. What is your program and how are you who are you serving? Support.
No, I was gonna say if
Yep.
you wanted to skip over the slide, we can, but.
Okay, yeah, I know we're kind of running short on time. The only thing I want to point out here is on the section 2, because there's a question that was raised about this already. So provide details of the support services provided to the participants by your organization. So this is where you're going to want to make sure that, and this is an important one. States want to know what supports you're providing to your participants to ensure that they're successful in being able to complete employment and training program. So I would be very intentional about making sure that you are highlighting the supports that you're offering, and how that those are E&T eligible. The question that you had about, say, like bicycles as an example, the one thing that I'll caution you to, and that we can link in here, is that the states are able to kind of dictate which supportive services that they're going to offer, but also any kind of limits that they're going to place on when those supports would be. And so, Nancy, to your question, I think about bikes, I looked up transportation, and while it doesn't say anything about explicitly saying like e-bikes or anything like that isn't allowed, it does say it's $100 per month cap that the state has implemented in that.
Per participant.
It's $100 per month for a 12-month period per participant. So what I would say to suggest, and we can link in the state plan, what those participant supports are and what those limits are, just so that you have that as knowledge when you're completing this section. The other thing that I want to just point out is that, and I don't know if this is something that I would necessarily recommend as a first-time third-party provider onboarding with the state, but what I will say is, like, the states have discretion on these limits and they can be adjusted as necessary. And a lot of the states that I've worked with, they're willing to do that, but they just need some justification on why you would say, like, this support is not enough, and it's a barrier for our participants to complete. I would almost recommend that, as you establish yourself as a provider and you build those relationships with your agencies, so maybe not in year 1, but maybe year 2 or year 3, then that would be a great time for you to be able to kind of reach out and be like, hey, we'd really like to see these limits increased, and this is why. And normally the states can be pretty receptive to that. I had a prime example in Oklahoma. We had a supportive service limit on transportation, and it was relatively low. Participants are having to travel pretty long distances, and so one of our third-party providers that we provide intermediary services for was asking for it to be increased. So I reached out to the state and I'm like, hey, I have a third-party provider that wants to increase the limit. Can you kind of tell me about how the state came up with this limit? And the state admittedly just said, honestly, it was a pretty arbitrary limit. There was no real designation for how they came up with it. It sounded like a good number. So, just keep things like that in mind, and that these are negotiable things, but, there's a process to request it. And next slide, please.
So, I'll get through this and I'll go ahead and I'll chime in.
Yeah. We'll skip over this one, but because it kind of goes to, again, what we were just talking about on what are allowable supports and what are not allowable supports. So in the application, even there is a section in there that they explicitly state, these are what we will allow for in our program. These are what we will not allow for our program. The one thing I want to point out, though, too, also that I didn't mention before, as it relates to your supportive services, there is a criteria that needs to be met, and basically They need to be reasonable, they need to be necessary, and it needs to be directly related to their employment and training. And when I say that, it's because a lot of people get hung up on what is considered necessary for employment and training. So as an example, you might provide transportation assistance for somebody to get to and from doctor's appointments because maybe they have some kind of illness or something like that. Or another example is that you are providing transportation assistance to get to their mental health appointments. Even though you could say, well, this person is sick, and if they can't get better, that they're not going to be able to, participate in their employment and training or be able to, get a job. It's not directly related to the employment and training program, and so it's not generally considered an allowable expense. Mental health services, it's the same thing. So really, when you're providing transportation assistance, those support services being tied directly to employment and training means that this transportation assistance is helping them get to and from their class, or it's helping them get to and from a job interview, right? And then, or if they're in job retention, because that's a component that I don't know that we highlighted here, it's because they've already secured employment and it's helping them get to and from their job. So just as a caveat there, when we're talking about support services and making sure that those are well documented as far as what's allowable and what's not. Very last thing is your application is going to be this document submission checklist. So they've asked for all of these things to get uploaded with your application. So a detailed program proposal, proof of existing funds. So again, there's non-favorable funds, a sample brochure or a program outline if you have it. So I would also suggest, like, if you have something that you're already doing an orientation that kind of highlights this is what our program is and how it works, that would be a great thing to be able to provide there. How you're tracking that participation log. So work participation log, component tracking log for each individual component that you're offering, how you're tracking their engagement in that component, how you're monitoring your individual participants and their tracking their, again, that kind of go back to having an individualized employment plan and how are you performing your case management and tracking their progress through that. So an example of that. And then the most recent fiscal and monitoring report of your organization. So I know it's a lot of documentation that they're asking for, but that's just what they put in the app.
All right, guys, we have just
Yep.
1 minute.
Perfect.
So I want to reserve some time for questions if you have them, and also highlight to the housing comment. It's not in there now, but we see housing as an allowable cost across the country. Florida's just starting out. So you all have this really great opportunity to help shape what this could look like, right? Because you guys are the ones serving participants and people in your communities on the ground. So I encourage you to think about that, even if, housing might be a big expense for you right now. It is for everybody. It doesn't, because it's not allowable now, doesn't mean it won't be in the future, especially if it's something that we see in other states. Okay, I'm done. Questions?
I just wanted to ask